Let's get going to not take up too much more time of everyone. So thanks for everyone for being patient. So in this webinar, we're actually doing the audience poll right now, so I'll keep that up for a few more minutes. So please fill it out. A few questions, mostly serious. And the last one, of course, do you prefer doom scrolling or binge watching? I've actually transferred from being a binge watcher more to a doom scroller. And I don't know if it's better. I think it's about the same, but maybe you have your preference out there in terms of doom scrolling or binge watching. In terms of the background, and once Harsha comes in, we'll get him in right away. I'm looking at the list of attendees, but once he comes in, we'll make sure that he has his proper introduction. So my name is Zach Brooks from UGenome. We are helping host this event today, along with fantastic other people, Harsha from Jeeva Clinical Trials, Victoria from Clinical Media, and Jonathan from Oatmeal Health. So Victoria, if you want to go ahead and give a 1-minute introduction, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'm Victoria Donovan. I'm founder and CEO of Clinically Media, which is a specialized firm that experts in recruiting patients for clinical research studies.
Thank you. And Jonathan, if you want to go ahead and give a quick introduction.
Absolutely. Jonathan Gobet, the CEO of Oatmeal. We're a unique organization that provides hybrid care, both healthcare delivery and diagnostics on the radiology side, specifically built for federally qualified health centers. So high level, we go in and help supplement all the services and staffing, all for free. In return, we actually generate revenue for our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, I'm still looking for Harsha, and I know it's tricky. I'm not sure what's going on in his end, but as soon as I see him, I'll loop him in and we'll have him do an introduction. So we had 5 topics we decided on to talk about today: pre-screening, AI workflow and automation, equity, underserved populations, and inclusive recruitment, genomics, electronic health records and eligibility, alignment, partnering models, and earlier collaboration, and finally, regulatory privacy and governance. So we have some questions in a particular order, and I'll go ahead and scroll down to Victoria's question for now. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Sophie on our end will collect those questions and we can promote them a little bit later so we get direct audience questions to the panelists. So Victoria, so about 3 minutes. Where does mistrust show up for you during screening, and how do you try to operationalize trust building? What kind of steps do you take to make this process seem and feel and actually become and really is more of a trustworthy process? Victoria, I think you're muted.
Of course I am. Here I am. Start from the beginning. So it really depends on the kind of population we're recruiting and really if we're filling diversity enrollment goals or not. So on the one hand, if we're recruiting for something that is pretty common, that there's been a lot of clinical trials in, patients come in with a level of trust, and it's really a matter of maintaining that trust and providing high quality materials, providing high quality communications, and maintaining a consistent message across the board that if you say someone's going to call you in 2 days to schedule your appointment, that somebody actually follows up and does that. On the other end of the spectrum, if we're recruiting minority populations or populations for an indication that has not had a lot of research done in it, patients come in with an inherent level of distrust. So we saw that we had a big campaign in hyperhidrosis patient recruitment. So it's excessive sweating. And this was many years back, and the cultural view around excessive sweating was everyone sweats. This isn't a medical issue. Why, you just want to have an easy life without sweating, which there's nothing wrong with that, first of all. But second of all, this was recruiting for a medical indication. It was really hard to get people kind of across that line of, no, this is a medical study. If you really do have hyperhidrosis, you know that this is an issue beyond just like an aesthetic. I don't want to be sweaty and it's hot out. And then add in the level of needing to fill diverse patient enrollment goals, and you're dipping into populations who have historically been, quite honestly, like horrifically marginalized by clinical research in general, and very rightly so come in with a inherent distrust of the system and to a medical system that has not served them. And so that is mediated by a building of trust by high quality materials, again, high quality communications, but also communicating to patients that they are really needed and wanted and matter in this clinical research study. And it's not just about, running people through it's as lab rats or as guinea pigs through a clinical trial. This is a real need, and they are filling a very important role in advancing medicine.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, man. Just one kind of follow-up question to that. I mean, when you started, it was like, okay, there's one level here, but you really talked about, social cultural issues, and there was like at least 10 issues you listed there. So is it, now that you've had this operationalized, you've done it so much, you kind of have a sense of how to do it, or do you have to kind of spell these different things out? Because it's not one thing, it's at least 10 things you listed to try to build trust for people.
Every time we're running a really large, like big central patient recruitment campaign, we start almost at the beginning and do market research and understand what landscape we're coming into, because new drugs come on the market, new trials have been enrolling, new areas have clinical research sites that didn't before. And so the cultural view that you're presenting your opportunity to, or the cultural situation that you're presenting your opportunity to, changes, and it can be totally different 2 years ago than it is now. We have an idea of what's going to go on, and we come in with our own hypothesis, but there's a lot of learning, and we use all the data that comes in, like at every point during our campaigns, to feed back and create more and more effective campaigns. It's sort of like a big blanket strategy, and then we see the 4 or 5 channels that are really producing actual patients who are showing up and who are enrolling and who are excited to be in the study. And we double, triple, quadruple down on those channels versus, kind of wasting money and casting the wide net continually. And all that's really data driven and AI driven and machine learning driven. And there's just so much data now to play with. It's very cool.
Yeah, but the learning literally never ends, it sounds like. So thank you for that, Victoria. So Jonathan, I'll go to you now. Again, if you have any questions, share in the chat. I made everyone a speaker, so that should help at this point. Jonathan, this is for you. How does AI help you practically, and probably that's a key word in this one, practically merge genomic criteria with messy reality of electronic health records? That if anyone's been around electronic health records, they are very, very messy. So this is almost an understatement of a word. But Jonathan, how do you practically merge these things?
Absolutely. I want to touch on Victoria's last statement. Trust is everything. How we interfere or interwork ourselves into the health system itself is we're credentialed there. So we actually embed our clinical staff, both radiologists and nursing teams, within the FQHCs and partners we work with. So when we call our patients to participate in trials, it's not we're a third-party source. We actually are their care provider legally. And that helps bridge the gap between education and trust that's much needed in the environment. Now, going into the data side, that also is very important. In order to have full access to all the data, that embedment of what we do allows us to have access not only to logins of the EHR itself, since we're clinically taking care of patients for other disease states like lung cancer, for example, but we also allows us to collect the data and put it into our database to scrub that data, such as comorbidities in labs and vitals, genomics, et cetera, to identify patients that are perfect for trial. Now, the key with most of this is that's just 1/3 of the data set. We still need to integrate into the pathology networks, oncology, and also to the imaging side of things as well. And most health systems don't give you access to that data unless you're a care provider. It's very tough to get, especially in real time and longitudinal, meaning the last 5 or 10 years for that patient, and then connecting all of those dots together. So as we refer our patients to these third-party sites for treatment or for biopsy, et cetera, that's where we collect all 3 parties' data and put it into one system. Allows us to find patients a lot faster and more so guide them down the path and navigate them into the screening and also to the full trial in the future. High level, though, the most valuable data, especially in the oncology world where we play in, is for treatment naive. So that small little window between diagnosis and treatment is where most of the larger players, especially in the pharma world, want to find their patients. Well, you can't ask the patient to wait. So you literally have maybe a 1 to 3 week window to actually collect, for example, a biopsy or liquid biopsy in that process. And so we are since we're on the ground with our patients, we actually can collect that at the point of care directly and then help facilitate that trial. So collecting that data, we utilize very high level AI solutions, both LLMs, generative AI, and other computer vision technologies to draw in that data and then basically collate it in a way that expresses the program's requirements. So for the sponsors, for example, I won't bore you with the complete details, but that includes anything from, in our case, smoking history, medication, clinical notes. On the imaging side, the actual scans themselves and the radiologist's interpretations. And then on the cancer side, pathology reports, staging, and biomarker data. And that's tough to find, number one, but once you have it, then obviously you can utilize certain data sets and AI to figure out which patients are perfect for that trial. But that's honestly, that's the easy part. The hardest challenge is actually getting the patient to show up in the first place, as we all can attest to. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So the one question I had wanted based on is you said the small little window for between diagnosis and treatment. So can you talk about it a little bit more?
Absolutely. So I think that's where most larger CROs fail, is that, especially, and we all know the statistics on trials, most of them do fail because they can't find enough patients, is having the ability to interact with the patient in real time as their care provider is key in all this. Most CROs have a sponsor and they work directly with them, but they rely on third parties to do the work. We're not the third party. We're actually integrated, and our staffing is credentialed under their program so that we are the ones calling the patient, not somebody else. And that's really the magic of all this. But that small window is, example, if we send our patient via referral to a lung cancer CT scan and they identify with something worrisome, and we're also partnered with a company that's working on a lung cancer diagnostic, for example, or liquid biopsy, we can identify those patients in real time and then get them to participate in a trial, not only just because they get paid for it, because we offer spiffs for those, but also more so to align themselves with new opportunities in the future for treatment and or identification. And that's key, because most patients, number one, are not educated enough to find these trials on their own, more so to know if they're actually eligible or not. And our nursing teams, not only do we help them get their treatment, but we also guide them in a pathway of finding new solutions that might be better for their health.
Yeah, thanks. And that small little window seems like it might be small, but it might be more fruitful than in the past because of these new technologies and the adoption of them. So Harsh, it's good to see you. I'll just go back quickly to the screen where I had your picture.
Yeah.
If you want to take a minute and introduce yourself, that would be great. And then we'll get you right to your questions.
Absolutely, Zach. Pleasure to be here. Harsha Rajasimha, founder of Jeeva Clinical Trials. Background in genomics and data science, postdoc at NIH, Cancer Institute and Eye Institute, and consultant to Big Pharma for several years in the clinical R&D. A rare dad as well, from a personal experience, a child with Edwards syndrome. So kind of got me into patient advocacy and accelerating therapies for rare and common indications, both with tech innovation and nonprofit patient advocacy. I believe are two critical pillars to accelerate R&D. One of the key challenges we hear is, especially when we talk about precision medicine and targeted therapies, screen failures is a huge problem, which is not always easy to anticipate in advance, because as many of these therapies may have companion diagnostics and multiple biomarkers, and identifying patients who not only match the eligibility criteria, such as age, gender, race, demographics, and family history, but also molecular signatures. And that's where, when we get down to the molecular level, screen failures can be quite significant and hard to anticipate. That's where coming up with strategies to minimize screen failures or be able to efficiently get through that, either prediction based, or once we do get into the actual screening process, automating that process and identifying patients who match both the clinical and molecular prerequisites of our screening purposes. So that's been my perspective. That's I saw we had a couple questions there, including the underserved minorities and populations, equity and screening and workflows. So this is where, some of the pre-screening can be done by patients responding to these questionnaires themselves, to an extent where patients can be expected to answer questions, simple things like date of birth or age and gender and other things. But when it gets into the clinical and molecular level, they still have to be referred to a actual site, to a clinical site, and some lab tests may be involved, genomic or genetic testing, but also in the case of cancer, there's more advanced molecular screening and testing. And all of that data needs to be gathered, analyzed, interpreted before a decision can be made whether a patient is actually eligible or not for a particular study. And there is opportunity for AI now to automate some of those workflows. And that's one of the areas where we focus on at Jeeva, where we focus on streamlining and automating the process of clinical trials from start to finish in a unified system, so that we are not doing a patchwork or band-aid, one band-aid in the pre-screening stage and another one after enrollment and so on. So having that continuity of the workflow is where we focus on. And so I think that's where I'm excited to hear other panelists. Sorry, I missed the first few minutes due to technical difficulty, and I'm looking forward to catching up. And I believe,
yeah. Thanks, Harsha. So just a quick question. So what is the high-level percentage of the screening failures? I mean, there's probably multiple studies out there showing, but what are like the numbers out there for these screening failures?
Yeah, it's a very wide range that I have heard, where could be 99% screen failures in some instances where they are kind of shooting in the dark. So they may have to screen a large number, like at a population scale screening, to identify needle in the haystack kind of a situation, which is not a good situation to be in. And so trials that are designed well are very focused and targeted and have good data from registries with patient registries or incidence data, not just theoretical prevalence data of, we estimate there's going to be 100,000 patients with this particular gene mutation, but where are they? Is there a patient registry where all of that data is well organized and characterized and captured in a way that's acceptable to the regulators? And
yes,
those are...
Yeah, no, continue, Harsha. Finish your thought.
Yeah, those do exist in the case of rare diseases, where there is over 11,000 named rare diseases that's known to science and medicine as of now. And several thousand of them do have a patient registry database, whether at a national level or at an international level. And they are very critical, as FDA and NIH have stated since 2014, that the existence of patient registry and natural history studies can be critical in, especially in rare diseases where the literature is quite limited.
So kind of building on your intro, and let's maybe combine that with rare disease, and let's look at this question. Which data do you actually need to automate pre-screening safely? Let's talk about for a rare disease trial.
Yeah, 80% of these rare diseases are monogenic, which means, if, for example, cystic fibrosis, a CFTR gene mutation can cause that. And in that case, it's very focused and targeted. And so we want to, the pre-screening could target patients who are already known to have cystic fibrosis, and ideally also known to have specific mutations in the CFTR gene, right? Whereas in the case of oncology, it can be more complex, as there are a number of oncogenes, tumor suppressor genes. There may be multiple genes involved and not just monogenic. And that's where screening gets more complicated. Whereas in a monogenic disease, it can be quite well planned and predicted in advance, especially when patient registries exist for that disease.
Got it. Thank you. So go on to the next question. So I've been working on the back end. It looks like most people should have chat enabled, but I've also made everyone able to speak, with the functionality. So we'll maybe do another round of questions from our panelists, but then we'll see if we can get some questions directly, because we have over 10 or so people who've been a part of this so far. So thank you, Victoria and Jonathan, for your earlier questions. So let's get to the second round of questions. And Jonathan, I'll have you go first this time. So number one here, how do you handle getting consent when using data, outside data for pre-screening?
Muted, Jonathan.
Short answer on this one. Outside data is complicated to achieve unless you're typically clinically validated within the ecosystem you're working in. So for example, primary care or oncology in our case. And so by embedding ourselves, that allows us to have access to this data. It took a long time legally to work with our partners for them to even trust us to do this type of work. I think that's where most startups in the vendor side fail, is they don't achieve that level of trust before they are granted access to these types of data sets, and definitely not direct access to patients. I already kind of mentioned that before, but that's kind of how we've succeeded with our business model. I wanted to just touch on, we do the screenings themselves clinically for our patients first, meaning we actually can run the eligibility checks for our patients. And this is for the clinical side, actually treatment for our patients. And then if they qualify for external partnerships, such as we have a few with UGenome, for example, they're a liver cancer liquid biopsy company. And we also connect them to them as well. So those systems actually send us out their vial kits where our phlebotomists on site will draw blood and then conduct those trials if needed. Either real world studies in this case, and or actual pre-trial where they actually want to participate in phase 1s or phase 2s or phase 3s for that matter. So hopefully that's answered.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. I mean,
that's for the health system. For the patient, we just work with our patients directly and have them sign a release.
Sure. So one of the things you mentioned early on, I think this might be interesting for some of the people listening in, is why is outside data more difficult, tricky? I forget how you said it, but you said right away, you said outside data is much, much harder. Why is that the case?
It's a trust factor.
Okay.
It's going out, especially in our shoes, we're a smaller startup. How do you go after a large system that has 300,000 patients and say, hey, can we have all your data? Well, they're going to ask some questions, and that may take 1 or 2 years to achieve. But once you have that network built out, then the next 10 systems in that state, since they trust the first one, will grant you access. That's kind of our model for scaling. We go state by state and build relationships with each individual large system, either hospital and or primary care system.
Okay. Yeah. So it's just trust build 101.
Go ahead, Zach.
No, jump in, Victoria.
No, I was going to say that such a balance with it too, that Jonathan, you talked about earlier, where you've built up trust with your database of patients, with your network, and you're the one who actually calls them and screens them. That if you are dipping into someone else's database and network, it can be really hard to have success there, because they're like, who are you? Like, why are you? And why do you want to know my health information? And like, you want me to join a clinical study that's like, what? So we've seen a lot of success when we partner with organizations that, instead of taking their database, will use them as the voice to speak to their database. And really, I'm talking about like patient advocacy groups, especially in rare disease. There's just the return on that is so much higher than like buying a list somewhere and reaching out. And even if it's de-identified and anonymized email addresses, like the return is so low, which just speaks to why, like, how important having trust in your healthcare system, provider, like all of that. And if your doctor recommends you should look at this study, you're going to go look at it. If like I call up someone, they're like, who's Victoria Donovan? No, I'm good. Thank you. Like I'm busy. I've got stuff to do. I just kind of want to get better. So
100%. And so just context, we are their doctor.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Reason we get a little easier time in navigating these challenges, but otherwise you're right. It's the hit rate on a email campaign is almost non-existent. Hence why they pay you $100,000 for this type of consent.
Totally.
It takes a long time, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah, Harsha, if you want to jump in, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll go to another question. If you have any comments on this nice thread.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd like to tie it back to this second bullet point around equity and inclusive recruitment. As one of the key things about recruitment strategy and screening strategies has to do with understanding the prevalence and incidence of a particular disease, whether it's common or rare, is so critical, especially in the general population. Not all disease affect people the same. And so understanding sickle cell disease disproportionately affects certain population, whereas cystic fibrosis might disproportionately affect another set of populations. And so having that understanding both from a geographic perspective, race and ethnicity perspective, genetic background will really help shape how the screen failures can be managed and accelerated recruitment can be achieved if we have the sites in the right place and access to databases that have database of patients that could be screened. Even in electronic medical records, there is increasing amount of access to quickly scan both structured and unstructured data to identify potential prospective patients, at least in the United States. But when we go global, many of the countries still don't have established medical record systems. And having an idea of where the target populations are located and the systems that could be leveraged to accelerate screening will be very critical.
Richard Lewis had an interesting question that he put in the Q&A that kind of for Oatmeal. He had two questions, but I'm going to go to your second one, Richard, that asked, do you find legal concerns are often at odds with clinical urgency, and how does Oatmeal help bridge that gap while staying compliant?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That our number one challenge, and mind you, we're still a smaller startup, is that we had to build a trust with our main partners. Example, El Rio Health. They're the 12th largest health system in the country for primary care, about 130,000 patients. And for us to work with them, it took a whole team approach, meaning I worked with their CEO directly and all their chief level staffs for over about a year and a half to develop the plan to do all this. The legal frameworks, the consent frameworks, the billing, the scheduling, the back office workflows, because we wanted to take ownership off their plate since they weren't doing this before. And I'll give you context, these are not academic centers. These are primary care nonprofits under the Medicaid, Medicare program. So they've never done this before. And so you may know about the Medicaid redetermination that's coming due in the next year or so. That's going to offset pretty much almost 20 to 30% or more of their budget, meaning patients are not going to be able to be screened anymore or taken care of, meaning they're going to have to go to the ER. And so these systems are looking for more opportunities to build revenue streams outside of just clinical reimbursement and grants. Grants are obviously also going away. Many of them are. And so they're now finally open to doing things like this as long as it's in the best benefits of their patients. So legally,
sorry, finish your thought.
So it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of redlining. We have a very fun and expensive attorney that helped us get through this process. But having that direct interaction with their clinical or their executive level teams and their clinical teams at El Rio helped a lot, because we got to build a framework.
How does AI and like machine learning, like what are the legal concerns? I'm just curious, like around using that, and what are there guidelines that are available now? I know it's not like brand new anymore, but
there's
no,
not.
wow.
In our space, there's not. I would say only a fraction of a % of the system, so like 99% do not have an AI governance board yet. They know AI is beneficial, and this is for clinical AI, by the way. I'll give you one brief statistic. So there are 11,000 CPT codes in America, 11 billion annual claims in our space total. Out of those, there's only 500 companies that have the ability to have an AI company that can do clinical diagnostics in some form, lung, breast, et cetera. And out of those, only 16 out of 11,000 codes actually have the ability to be reimbursed for care, meaning actually have a CPT code that reimburses them some dollar value. That gives you context of how rare AI is still being used. So noting that, these systems are scared to buy or use solutions from vendors because of that fact, because they're not clinically embedded, they're zero trust yet. And the key of this is they're not at risk, meaning these systems go in and try to sell something versus share revenue in a way that's equitable to both parties. Now, that's what we're doing is new because we share, but most don't. So we're hoping to see this type of new model approach healthcare in the next 5 or 10 years where it becomes propagated, because these systems are not going to be there in 5 years if we don't help them generate additional revenue in some form. And by clinical trials, by sharing that revenue back with them, a certain percentage of it, they can now subsidize uninsured patients. So patients that typically would never get screened for something now can, because pharma or therapeutic companies or medtech AI companies now fund that opportunity in that city. So that's kind of our model, is expanding that process. And we do work with CROs as well, because they love to work with our patients directly.
Yeah. So Harsha, you're using a lot of AI tools in your worlds. How are they helping? What are some hiccups? I mean, like one of them that Jonathan mentioned in passing is that a lot of them don't have governance boards and so forth. So you get like this rush of really good technology with actually human organizational pressures and so forth. Are you seeing anything like that in your end, or were you able to get quicker, faster, better with some of the AI tools you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. AI is being used more in the administrative and non-clinical areas quite a bit, like scribing notes and extracting information from unstructured notes and data, but also from screening. I saw a couple questions in the Q&A. One talking about how AI can be used for predicting screen failures. So AI is actually being used for filtering, right, and screening itself. So we don't need to predict it. We just screen, right? So in the sense, it says here are we scanned 1 million patients, and here are 100 patients that seem to match or pass the preliminary screening. And you have no choice but to trust it for that, and evaluate the 100 that are predicted to actually pass the screening process. If you start seeing that the 100 is no good, then AI has not worked. So it's similar to any kind of filtering and screening tools that we have used in the past, whether it's SQL queries or AI. Ultimately, humans who review it have to use the judgment and say, okay, so the quality of screened patients have been quite good. So almost everyone I have looked at have actually matched with the criteria when they manually review it. So that's one. And the second part is, once they are recruited, how do we retain them, right? And that's a whole logistical, operational aspects and human aspects of patient engagement, digital patient engagement, where possible. Of course, when they show up at the clinic, that's where the rubber meets the roads, where sites have the capability to connect with the patients and engage them. But between those visits, especially if the visits are far too spread apart, email, text messaging, televisits for check-ins, and digital engagement, setting up medication reminders or pill diaries or symptom trackers. Those types of digital tools are become more routine in many studies, especially as more and more decentralized studies protocols are getting designed, where patients can participate from the comfort of their home and minimize the number of times they have to visit the site unless it's really required. So I think retention is a very important part, especially given the amount of effort that goes into recruitment. Every individual participant is so valuable and has to be treated properly with white glove engagement throughout the study, so we don't lose the precious engagement.
I'm going to add into that too. So thanks, Marco, for the question. It was, once you get through recruitment, retention is the next hurdle. Victoria, can you talk a little about retention of volunteers in clinical trials? How does that differ from recruitment? What are the challenges? What tools do you use? Awesome answer, Harsha. I'm going to add one thing, that making sure the patients understand like how important they are and how much we need them there and want them there and how valuable they really are. And that's a matter of choosing sites that are really good, that patients like going to, choosing sites that are convenient, choosing sites that have like just a high quality of service that they're offering. And your sites should, that's what they're good at. They're good at healthcare. Where it falls apart is when sites have 1,000 trials they're working on, and that's an exaggeration, but they're spread so thin. and they already barely have enough time in the day to do anything. And then you add in extras for them to do, like patient recruitment. And your sites aren't recruiters, they're not marketers, they're not advertisers, they're there to take care of your patients. So taking away that extra stuff from your sites and allowing them to do what they're really good at, which is take care of patients and provide healthcare, is, I mean, it's huge. And we have sites we recommend that are like, from the outside as a vendor to work with. And this is a little, just bear with me here. This is a compliment. It's going to sound a little rough around the edges. They can be really hard to work with because they, like, everything is to the book, and they have these like you can hardly get a phone call with them. And then, what do you want? We're doing everything we can. But they get really good data, and the patients love going there because they're patient facing, like you know like brand is phenomenal, and everything is so tight, and they feel safe, and they feel like, when they give them their health data, and when they're going in for something that feels experimental sometimes, that they're in really good hands. And that's, I mean, cannot be overstated, and I way overstated it, but it's just that trust. It's so much easier said than done too, and a lot of it's out of your hands. Once something goes to a site, you're depending on so many other people to, have all the taxes fall and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah, so Victoria, maybe you could pick up number 3 a little bit, because from this segment of the conversation, it's sort of like, very individual trust that Jonathan said multiple times, and so have you. But then there's the system, and then there's the AI. And so there's the 3 or 4 things going on. It's like, hardcore, fast digital technologies with just humans moving along how humans do. So number 3, like, what is a structure that aligns these incentives, or, I don't know, ways to get things done better across these multiple groups? Do you have any best practices or best things you've seen from your experience, Victoria?
Yeah, this is, again, much easier said than done, but hire
Okay.
really good people for each
Hmm.
like specific role, and let them have full responsibility over the success of that program. And for us, we have a lot of success with performance-based pricing models. So, I mean, we're trusted to get patients enrolled for a study, but we only get paid when qualified leads come in, and when patients actually show up, and when they enroll in the study. So we're very aligned in that, and it's de-risked. And there's structures like that aren't exactly the same, but that can be applied to the other experts that need to come in to actually make a study work really well. So really good sites. And I mean, I can speak to patient recruitment, but a single really good patient recruitment vendor, or if you have multiple that they're working on entirely different things, so they're not accidentally competing with each other, like in the digital space, because in digital, it's whoever can pay the most for leads that's going to win. And if you're competing with another vendor for the exact same psoriasis patients in the exact same cities, you're just outbidding each other and driving up the cost, and nobody wins there, because your ROI is terrible, and nobody's happy, nothing gets enrolled, the end of the year comes and goes, and patents run out, and money runs out, and milestones aren't met, and you can't get funding, and yeah, the whole sob story.
Very good points, Victoria. I'd like to jump in and add a couple things, right? So one, we have seen over and over again, the sponsors and assume that sites are going to do all the recruitment and in the beginning, and then they open up their eyes 6 months, 9 months, when the trial is in a rescue mode now already. Like, oh my God, what happened? Like 6 months and only 10 patients enrolled. And so avoid that front loading of recruitment effort. Recruitment does not happen on its own. It takes concerted, dedicated focus and effort to get that going. And that's the most important factor for the success of the study, and also for managing budgets and timelines. And 2, the other part is engaging the regulators and patients early on. If there are patient advocacy groups involved in that disease area, find the foundations and advocates that are involved in that. Sometimes FDA has what are called patient listening sessions. There is a division for patient affairs at the FDA, and what the paradigm they call patient-focused drug development. And if there is ultimately, patients are the ultimate beneficiaries of a drug or a therapy that's being developed. And understanding their perspective, and there are some rules, regulations on who can and cannot be talking to patients in a blinded, a double-blind study, and so on. So we got to be careful. But there are mechanisms by which we can listen in a public forum organized by the FDA, such as patient listening sessions. So those, I would say, patient centricity, engaging patient foundations early on, and understanding their perspective, and front-loading the recruitment effort and not take it for granted. Those would be critical.
Amen. You cannot take it for granted. It does not just happen. You're going to get a couple sites who are really good and get 10 patients each. It just does not just happen. It feels like it does when everything goes to plan and you have a big campaign and you run it and plan ahead and front load it, which is, I love that term and way to describe it. But man, it really doesn't just happen.
So I've tried multiple methods. I mentioned this in the chat for people to be able to chat and so forth. So I got an indication it works. So if anyone has a question, you can just say it out loud or put it in the chat if that's worked. So because we'd love to hear, we've gotten a few requests and a few questions. We love answering those questions directly. So if anyone has anything, please shout it out or chat it.
What's your approach to balancing marketing creativity with clinical accuracy and compliance?
Whoever wants to jump on that.
Yeah, I can start. So we have, and this kind of answers Richard Theron's question a little bit in how AI can be helpful in overcoming cultural biases, patient hesitancy. So everything that gets shown to a patient in a clinical patient recruitment campaign needs to be IRB approved, right? That is a huge hurdle if you have every single static creative that's IRB approved, because you're really stuck then using, even if you have 50 different creatives, you're going to find out that this wording works better than that wording and this image works better than that image. And you're going to want to kind of mix and match, and you're going to want to max different captions in. So what we do is, with the help of AI and then reviewed by actual human eyes, because we know what's going to actually land with real humans, is take all of our previous recruitment creatives, all the data that comes with them, what actually ended up converting, what actually ended up getting clicks, pull in the new protocol information and generate a kind of mix and match style, really long Word document with a few different tables in it of different kind of mix and match, how to make different titles and captions and like longer email format things and blog posts and SEO posts, that all of that is then IRB approved and mentions, this is going to be used with an image that portrays a woman with psoriasis who's crying, or that's terrible. But you then submit that to the IRB, get that approved, and that gives you a lot of room to play around with different, and you're still going to feel a little bit like you're in a box with that, but that's the best way that we've found. And that's what a lot of patient recruitment companies do it. And then also a lot of patient recruitment companies will sub out to other vendors, and you have someone who's really good at Google Ads, it's a vendor, and then you provide them those materials that are already approved, so you don't need to go through a whole other process. But it's a science and an art, and it takes a lot of forethought into what we think we're going to need, what platforms we're expecting to use, so that you have the right language for all of those platforms, and enough variety in that you can run ads for a year and they don't get completely tired and bogged down, because an ad can work great for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And then you kind of start to see a dip, and that's at a point where you either need to change who you're targeting or what you're using to talk to the patients, because it just gets tired. You see the same thing so many times, you doom scroll right by it and don't even see it.
Yeah, Richard, thanks for the question. Anyone else have any questions they want to shout out for the panelists? If not, we'll move on to then the lightning round. So 1 minute kind of response. So this is much quicker. I'll start with one, but you guys, jump in and so forth. I'll start with Jonathan this time around. Jonathan, decentralized versus hybrid versus site-based. Which model best supports equitable recruitment, and why?
Hybrid all the way for us. We want to leverage our nursing teams, like I mentioned before, to truly understand the recruitment cycle and what's needed. One point I forgot to mention before on the last question is we use video education directly with our patients based on who they are. So if they're an Asian woman that speaks Mandarin, we actually can send out customized templates that are pre-produced by AI in real time using their own medical record as a backdrop. So for example, if she just had an appointment 4 days ago, we can actually reference that appointment and also what happened within that appointment, any drug regimens or challenges they're having. And in addition to that, introduce a new trial directly at the point of care using their MyChart or other messaging system they're already used to. That's something that's seen a huge update or uplift on as far as getting people to participate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Harsha, number 2, or if you want to answer with the other one of the other ones, go ahead. But one metric you wish every sponsor tracked.
I would say demographics and reporting of the inclusion of different patient populations relative to the prevalence. That's one metric we don't see, we can't find in the clinicaltrials.gov database. It's free database dump. We have access to it, but we can't find that data.
Wow. I mean, that seems like one of the most obvious. Why is that not an obvious sort of demographic information to share?
Yes, it is available for some trials, especially if it's funded by the federal government. There is a mandate to capture the data, but for industry-sponsored studies, not always. And even when the data is available, it may not be made public. And it's hard to find.
Okay. Victoria, I'm going to go to number 3 for you. What's your 12-month prediction, Victoria? A lot of pressure on you here for how AI will or will not change recruitment.
We're going to see a lot more AI screening. We're already seeing it, but pre-screening and actual screening. And this worries me, I'm not going to lie, because people can detect if they're talking to AI versus a human. So I think it needs to be used really carefully and not as like a, hey, we're going to transfer all of this to AI, but more Jonathan was talking about, use it to, you're talking to someone, you use it to generate the right materials to send to them that are relevant to them, that are going to be the questions they can actually answer versus this like huge, insane intake form that 15 of the 30 pages don't actually apply to them. That's what we're going to see. And I'm ready for it to implode on itself a little bit when AI is like completely taken over and people are like, I don't want to talk to a robot. I'm joining a clinical trial. This is scary. Like, let me talk to a real person.
Thank you. Jonathan, I'll give you number 4. I put a poll in the chat for some people, but I'm going to have to leave here in the next minute or two. But what kind of collaborations should attendees pitch you after this webinar?
Absolutely. So we are deeply involved in lung cancer as our beachhead, but we love to work with others in other imaging-based technologies such as, liquid biopsies, for example. So we're working with Freenomes of the world, Delphi's, Biodesics of the world. We want to introduce, especially in rural America, we want to introduce liquid biopsies early, even though they're not compliant yet. They're more of a conversation starter. So if somebody's 1 to 3 hours away from imaging center, could we just send them a test kit or have them drive over 10 minutes to their local primary care facility, draw blood? Yes, it's not 100% accurate, but it can, hey, by the way, you did this blood test, there may be something worrisome. Let's have you go in for the full screening. That's very important for us. And so those are areas I would love to talk to you if you're building something in that space. So liquid biopsy, medtech AI, or any type of diagnostics. We would love to help you guys build your product and get it to market.
Great. Harsha, number 4 as well.
Thank you, Zach. I would say interested in talking to anyone who is looking to streamline the process of recruitment, one with patient education and engagement, even much before the trial even begins. But also in the context of clinical study, streamlining this hybrid mode that Jonathan mentioned, which is really the way to go, is a combination of remote patient screening coming from online. Patients are looking for opportunities and using ChatGPT and Google to identify clinical research opportunities, either to help out altruistically or to benefit their own health. Either way, there are people out there that can engage and participate. And so having a strategy, unified patient recruitment, remote screening technology at scale, which many of our customers are using to enroll thousands of patients on a monthly basis. That's something I would love to have people pitch after this.
Yeah, thank you. And Victoria, same question for you.
Yeah, I'm anything patient recruitment related, of course, but beyond that, I am very interested in how we can use geographic commuter route data, where are patients that we don't have research sites for them, and how can we bring care to them, because those are populations that need us. Maybe they want us, we'll make sure we pitch it right to them, but they're like untapped pools of people who it's a win-win. So anyone working on anything like that, I would love to talk to, and more just find it super interesting. So
Thank
there
you.
we
Thank
go.
you. Well, with just a few seconds to go, I'd like to thank Harsha, Victoria, and Jonathan, and all the participants. And thanks for your patience with whatever weirdness on the back end here today, but we'll finish on time and make sure we respect everyone's time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.